Hey guys, this is Rick Kelly with Alta Real Estate, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Murat Mutlu from INOA Architecture. He's the principal architect at the firm, and we're really excited to be working together on a new building that he has drawn, and I have been tasked to sell. So, Murat, questions. This project that we're doing together on 76 West 105th Street, how
Yes.
were you introduced to the project?
So I met one of the owners, Elias. We have a mutual friend, and
Got it.
they approached us because we have similar size project experiences that we did in the past in the city.
Can you describe the project or kind of talk about it a little bit, how it was when you first saw the project? I guess was a piece of empty land and how it is now?
Sure, it was part of this garden, and adjacent to the garden, they had this property, and it was quite narrow. You could technically do a two-family building. A multifamily was not like permitted zoning wise.
Sure.
So we did a six-story, sort of a vertical, two-unit building with elevator access and sort of multiple floors per unit.
Got it. And so the proximity to the park, I guess that was important to you, right?
It's basically a free amenity to the building. That was the main feature. And then typically when you do a true lot project in New York City, you don't get side windows. But here we were able to get side windows that had open space in front of it. So it's a rare opportunity to do it. So we used that opportunity. We created side windows, sort of side lot line windows facing to the garden.
Got it. So that extra set of west-facing windows you would not normally get in a townhouse, right?
Correct.
Because
You wouldn't
they
get
would
it.
be
Yeah.
kind of landlocked on either side and you'd have no windows.
Correct. It's basically a corner building
Sure.
without having the nuances of being a corner building, because the corner buildings are usually on an avenue
Sure.
at one side, and then one side is a side street. So the avenue is usually commercial, busy.
So what was the challenge in designing this building? Like we know, like you said, the garden was one of the things that makes it special. What was a design challenge you had?
The garden was not a challenge at all. It was an attraction. It was an
Sure.
amenity. But the size of the property was definitely a challenge. 18 feet is very narrow. Like a six-story building requires this what we call a stretcher compliant elevator, which is a big size elevator, and it's just 10 feet wide at least. And then whatever you have to work with, whatever is left for the hallways. So we were playing with inches to make the circulation work for that project.
Maybe it's whimsical, but I think that most architects, when they're given an idea of a project, they probably get a pencil and they start to scratch it out on paper. Is that how you do it, or are you more advanced? You use computers now? How did the original idea come about?
Definitely, we use computers for the production, but
Sure.
the original ideas, the concept, we comes through sketching and sort of visualizing the sketch, then afterwards in 3D. And usually, we like to approach projects with we utilize this sort of existing parameters, sort of neighbor buildings, the zoning requirements, the sort of entrance conditions, or the top sort of a skylight conditions that we may have. So we bring all these constraints and then generate a form. We don't typically, use a metaphor that we get inspired from whatever, subjective concept. It's
Sure.
usually very pragmatic approach. So we like to, let's say, the building entrance requires a canopy. We do it with an architectural gesture. So the upper floors are cantilevered to create a canopy. We want to create sort of an openness and sort of skylight condition on the top floor without creating a skylight, but we had like the sloping glass facade on the upper floor, so that created this
That's one of
openness.
the things that's very distinctive about the building,
Correct.
right? Is
Yes.
your angles on the glass
Yeah.
are not they're not all vertical, right? There's some interesting
Correct.
angles.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are all sort of pragmatically, they serve a purpose. So the
They
top
do.
top floor has that purpose of serving, being a skylight condition, bringing more light into the space. And then we have also alternating window sizes on the sort of street-facing facade. So that reflects some of the changes and the furniture layout changes in the space. Some have corner windows, some don't. So we like to use sort of the internal parameters also expressed outside on the building exterior.
I noticed
Yeah.
that there's also, a skylight into the cellar level.
Correct,
So
yeah.
it's very unusual, at least in townhouses, for the lower level to have any kind of natural light whatsoever. That sounds like it's a brilliant idea. Was that your idea?
It was, I want to say, mutual idea with the client, but
Okay.
we were able to execute it. In New York City, like in the zoning, building cellar space is basically free of FAR, so you can build as much cellar space as you want, but you don't want to build too much of it because it's dead dark space. But here we utilize this walkable skylight that allowed us to create this nice, usable, sort of in a way habitable space in the cellar for recreation purposes. So it was a matter of function that we wanted to create that led to this design concept.
The building also has an amazing roof deck as well with views of Central Park. Was there anything special about the roof deck that you designed?
So there's also challenges with building a small building because the zoning has limitations on how much bulkhead space you can have.
Okay.
So we were limited to like 20% of roof area for all the bulkheads, elevators. We have the elevator bulkhead, stair, mechanical space, and then we put all the condensing units, all the additional mechanical unit on top. So we created that sort of vertical, taller bulkhead space in order to create as much open space as possible on the roof deck, which has these beautiful views at the moment.
About the facade of the building, you differentiate yourself from the rest of the structures because it's mostly a lot of pre-war townhouses, right? But you're seen as new on the block, but you're not so new as to kind of to be a completely different, departure from the rest of the buildings. How important was it to you to incorporate a facade that was different, but yet not too different from the neighborhood?
So we used our material palette, not the color, but we used masonry, sort of brick blocks that matches sort of contextual facade construction. Like neighbor buildings have also brick masonry construction on the exterior, and then they typically have these sort of punch windows that are, similar size, repeating on multiple floors. So we also introduced punch windows, but we had an alternating pattern that matched with our interior layout. So using the masonry on the exterior and the punch window aesthetic, gave us some contextual relationship to the neighbor buildings. But we used sort of a gray, silver-looking concrete material that's more sort of contemporary, and it also allowed us to differentiate us from the adjacent structure. I think it's crucial to present a new structure and say, okay, this is a brand new space that will serve the residents for the future.
Can we back up for a little bit and let me just ask you some questions about your career?
Sure, yeah.
So how did you become an architect? What led you to this path?
I had a passion for furniture design.
For furniture design, okay.
Yeah. So that was sort of high school years, and
All right.
it got me into architecture school. And I did do interior and furniture design studies, like during my college years.
Sure.
And but architecture, I guess I realized the scale was more interesting to me, and you were able to see the object at a sort of a bigger scale, and that always attracted me. And we still do furniture design as part of our projects, sort of custom millwork, benches, lobby desks.
You've also worked for two very famous architectural firms, Skidmore, of course, and then Zaha Hadid. Can you talk a little bit about both of those, what your experiences were, and what your takeaway was after working with those shops?
Sure. Skidmore is, as you know, is a very established sort of high-rise architect, very corporate, has built the Freedom Tower in New York City, Burj Al Khalifa in Dubai, the tallest building on earth, and many other notable projects. So I got exposed to the sort of corporate architecture and sort of learned how to operate a project at a professional level where it's expected at sort of a corporate architectural level. And the Zaha Hadid office was quite the opposite. It was more sort of a flexible, free environment, I would say, and the projects were very creative. So
right, you probably could not have picked two more distant, separate firms, right? One was very much commercial, large scale, and then of course Zaha Hadid is very artistic and whimsical in her designs.
Correct. So that was we would design something and then we'll figure out how to make it practical. So that was the sort of the design process at that office.
And I noticed that in your firm you have a good mix of both residential and commercial. Is that intentional or just kind of how the commissions came?
So we don't select the project typology. We select sort of how much creativity we can put in to the project.
150 years from now, 200 years from now, people look back on your body of work. Maybe you've done 100 buildings, maybe more, hopefully. What are they going to know about you? What is it you're trying to do? What do you hope that people see in your work as a reflection of your aspirations? What do you want them to know?
That's quite a loaded question, but I think really, as I mentioned earlier, it's we want to make sure the people the users enjoy using our buildings, and only then the building will last longer.
Well, we're very delighted and very happy to have had a chance to talk with you.
Sure, thank you.
About 76 West 105th Street and all of your other projects. And we wish you the best of luck in the future, and we thank you so much for this beautiful building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.